cock and ball torture. So I guess they're my favorite faction now.
Originally, I wrote out this whole little mini story about what it's like to be attacked by the Dark Eldar from an Imperial point of view for the intro, but I decided that that's cringe and I also have story time later anyways. So instead, picture this. You're an elf, but instead of being inspired by Lord of the Rings, you're inspired by Dead by Daylight. You only exist to cause intense suffering and pain, as well as impotent rage.
Sounds less fun, but creating the suffering is probably better in Warhammer than doing the suffering, so maybe?
On top of that, you have technology so advanced even some of the other members of your race can't recreate it because they went down a different route on the tech tree, and every time they ask for it, you shoot a black hole at them. This is considered to be a minor display of power. Does all that sound appealing?
Yes, actually. Maybe not the being super evil part, but again, in Warhammer, you either suffer or you inflict the suffering, so which side is it gonna be, right?
Well, my friend, I invite you to come and check out the Drukhari.
Crush my cock with a rock I must. Maximum pain I must endure. Okay, here we go.
In the 40k universe, the Dark Eldar are the ones who saw their empire collapse into complete nothingness due to Slanesh and then bring it about, and went, let's not only keep doing what caused this, but double down on it. When the Eldar
They were like, man, this is kinda neat, actually.
Empire ate shit and died, which was probably literal for at least a few of them, the elves who would become the Drukhari were isolated in the Webway, a sort of pocket dimension where you can travel across the galaxy without having to go through hell to do it. Because of this, they didn't immediately get their souls devoured like everyone else. But they realized that they weren't safe, because you see, instead of their soul flooding out of their body in an instant, it was more like it was a leaky faucet that they just couldn't fix. Like that damn door. Then they realized that by causing others to suffer in their stead, they can not only stave off their own souls being eaten, but replenish themselves and regain their vigor. And
Yeah, I remember that part from one of the Bricky videos. So I roughly have an idea what the Drukhari are about. I kinda even get them, because you want to stay alive at all costs, and if that's what fixes you, you're gonna do it. At the same time, what a fucking miserable existence, dang.
thus have the Drukhari been for the last 10,000 years, invading real space periodically to gather more slaves, materials, and to refill their leaky faucet souls.
10,000 years! Jeez, that's a long-ass time to be alive and evil.
There's more to it than that, of course, but as far as background goes, that should suffice for what you need to know going in. So why would you want to play these sweat goblins? Well, if you want a faction that is completely and unapologetically evil, they're your guys, gals, and horrific flesh monstrosities. They literally feed on suffering. There's a story where when the Tau first encountered them, they did the Tau thing and were like, greetings, your spikiness, do you want to be friends? And the Dark Eldar, presumably amazed someone didn't gun them down on sight, were all like, sure thing, you blue bastards, we'll even help you fight some Tyranids. Say, would you mind sending a few dozen of your people back home with us? It's just a cultural exchange program. So the Tau trusted the half-naked, drug-addled spiky elves and sent a few of their people with them. You know, just a little vacation. Then another battle happened, and when it was done, the Tau realized that the horrific monstrosities the Dark Eldar called their troops were what the former Tau had been turned into. Enraged, they attacked.
Oh, dang. I remember hearing something like that. I just feel bad for the Tau. They're the nice guys in this whole thing.
Attacked the Dark Eldar, who promptly laughed and flipped them off before flying right away. After that, the Tau army received a desperate call for aid from the planet they came from because the Dark Eldar decided that with the rest of the Tau army away, it was time to play. By the time the Tau army had returned to the planet, they found that Eldar had abducted literally everyone on the thing to take home and torture. Just an entire planet.
Bruh.
So yeah, they're the worst of the worst and they love it. They're the supervillains of 40k because even Chaos, at least in theory, has positives to it. Tzeentch is the god of hope on top of merely pretending to be retarded, remember? The Dark Eldar, meanwhile, will take captives back to their home to literally feed on their suffering and throw them in a gladiatorial arena the size of a continent. Hell, throw an orphan into a blender the size of a semi-truck and see how his organs ricochet around while you're at it. Why the hell not? The world is your oyster, and if you're a Dark Eldar, you'll be coming up with new and exciting ways to molest that oyster. They come in all sorts of flavors too. There's BDSM mad scientists, BDSM foot soldier mafia members, BDSM samurai. Look, the BDSM is kind of required for the Dark Eldar.
I can tell.
which I'm putting as a positive because I talked about the merits of clay pussy in one of my videos, so I've got nothing to do but double down at this point. But my point is, they're very varied in their BDSM. Imagine if Dr. Doofenshmirtz made a device that caused everyone in the tri-state area to come down with cystic fibrosis, and then instead of getting foiled by Perry the Platypus, he flays his skin from his body and sends his head back to Phineas and Ferb. That's the homunculi, and they love doing that kind of shit. The Cabalites are all organized crime syndicates turned into legitimate political entities, so that's fun. Of course, maybe you prefer naked men and women fighting Tyranids in the world's largest coliseums. Pardon me, universe's largest coliseums. In that case, the witch cults are for you. Something else handy to take note of is that from a lore perspective, they're, believe it or not, in the perfect spot in terms of safety. Which is fucking ironic because Kamara is a galactic version of Detroit if it was built in the trenches of World War I, but hear me out. They're one of the least numerically significant in terms of all major factions, potentially even including the Tau, but I'm not quite sure about that one. Unlike everyone else, however, their entire population is anchored to one place, Kamara, and its adjacent realms which are directly connected to it. Because of this, trying to actually assault and wipe them out would cause massive and unbearable casualties on anyone who tried, even if they did successfully wipe the place out. This means that the Deldar, more than anyone else, are safe in their standing in the galaxy.
Great! The evil guys are super safe. Awesome!
Craft worlds can blow up, the Imperium can lose a few planets, but Kamara is here to stay. Also ironic for a society that models its views on loyalty and camaraderie on Starscream is that the average Dark Eldar doesn't really have to fear death, at least in real space raids. The homunculi can revive anyone as long as they have a scrap of that person's body. Could be some hair, could be a finger, could be a whole fucking limb.
Wait, so they're basically immortal unless they get, like, put in a blender, and even then, probably not entirely.
Grow that person and put their soul in the body, and presto, you're back. In fact, some Dark Eldar do this on purpose, that is to say, die on purpose, because they like the experience of death and rebirth. Most of them give at least a wee bit of flesh to a homunculus, because with backstabbing being so goddamn common in Kamara, it's best to hedge your bets and lose a finger in exchange for technical immortality. You know, for when your neighboring cabal decides you looked at them funny and mails you super anthrax. That way, even if you get blown to bits by a Baneblade, you're still coming back for round 2. And while they may be the Warhammer 40k equivalent of Dark Elves, more than anything, they draw a lot of inspiration from old Fey fairy tales. You know, the kind of fairy tales where entire cities disappear into the forest, never to appear again because some elves thought it'd be interesting to see what happens when you kidnap a man and light him on fire before kicking him into a stable or something else nice and flammable looking. Basically, do you want to be an elf but don't like all that pussy shit like crying over what once was and always being a dying race on the back foot? Well, then here you go, elves that kick ass and take names to enslave and torture later. There's also, of course, the more specific inspiration from the Warhammer Fantasy Dark Elves with the whole sail out into the world/galaxy to rape, enslave, and torture everyone else. The Dark Eldar and Craft Worlds just don't hate each other nearly as much as the Dark Elves and High Elves. How about rules? What are the big things they got going for them there? Well, I was originally going to say they're a race of glass cannons, but cannons don't usually fly around at Mach 3. No one is going to outrace you. I'm sorry, White Scars fans, but even Jagged Eye isn't fast enough to catch these bastards. You were fast as fuck. On top of that, a huge amount of the units have the ability to fly, so you're not getting bogged down by terrain either. You say, alright, next turn I'm gonna wipe this guy's units off the board, and then he moves them halfway across said board and tells you to cope. But in case you thought they were just gonna bleed you to death slowly while zooming around you like Sonic that goddamn hedgehog, all their weapons hit like trucks too. A good amount of their weapons have poison, which instead of causing some
Poison! I love poison in video games. I don't know how it is in tabletop, but I love dot effects, so
damage over time like in a video game instead means they have a minimum 2 wound roll that can't be reduced. Usually it's 4+, which translates to, if I hit you, there's a bare minimum 50 chance I damage you across a unit with 20 models in it. While some units like Games Workshop's Pet Mary Sue's are immune to poison, most are not. So Abaddon might feel nice and invincible until he realizes that all the Chaos Space Marines he brought with as a bodyguard are convulsing in agony on the ground around him, and there's 40 guns pointed directly at him by elves who are actively jerking off on the battlefield.
I was gonna pause and say, well, I don't know if I like the Dark Elf figurines that much, and then he said that line. They're not my favorite figurines, I will say, from what I've seen so far.
Run in, cause havoc, and run out. That's the Dark Eldar way. They also don't have quite the same problem that the Craft Worlds have with specialization. Sure, the Drakkar units are specialized to do things, but they can do alright outside of that zone. Not great, but alright, at least compared to the Craft World elves. Not that that's saying much, but it is still something. It's not the Craft Worlds where if your Howling Banshees aren't facing off against the exact right kinds of units, they're basically worthless. At least this is what I've seen and read, so your mileage may vary with this point, so please don't type fast to me in the comments. Nor do, I'm not a cop.
Hi guys, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you!
Anyway, they can also take units from other Eldar forces as allied detachments. Want the strength of a Wraith Guard to back up your units on the battlefield? Sure thing, bud. And if you put them in with the Yarna, you can do all sorts of crazy wombo combos with Harlequins, Craft Worlds, and other Dark Eldar. So you can shore up your forces and patch weaknesses in a way that a lot of other factions can. There's also Power from Pain, which grants additional effects to your Eldar as the game goes on. I won't cover it word for word because that's boring, but the short of it is, as the game progresses, the Dark Eldar becomes stronger and stronger. It makes them hit harder and can even offset their low durability to some extent. Finally, while this is a meta reason and varies from location to location, Dark Eldars are one of the rarer armies to see deployed. So while everyone and their mother has a counter to the Space Marines, the first few times you roll up with Lilith and the girls, no one's gonna have any real strategy to counter you beyond really hope the dice don't fuck them. So that's fun. But of course, they have flaws too, and we'll start with the lore. You are the assholes of the universe. Not only are you pure evil and forced to be at that, but everyone else knows it. The closest things to outside friends are the Harlequins, and that's not because they're on good terms, but more because the Harlequins scare the shit out of all other Eldars, so the Drukhari put up with them and their honk god. Don't expect anything like Yvrain and Gilliman being friends with benefits to happen to your faction, or even Gazgul and Eric's mutual hate boner. You're alone, and because you need to torture others to live, that isn't gonna change. If you want someone with even the slightest, most morally gray shade of good imaginable, go elsewhere. Relatedly, people are going to call you an edgy 12-year-old. And you know what?
Yeah.
They have a point.
Yeah.
As much as the Dark Eldar are just reveling in their supervillainy, they're also a race of edgy fucks who feed on suffering. I mean, come on.
They like literally everything that's edgy. Come on, yeah, 100%.
To some extent, you have to see how that's just a little bit too edgy, even by 40k standards. I have a few Dark Eldar models, so I personally don't think it's too big a deal, but that being the case, again, just look at them. Edge as far as the eye can see. And unlike with Chaos, they don't have the slight excuse of serving evil gods, so of course they're going to be edgelords. The Dark Eldar just decided that this was the height of fashion. So yeah, get used to people not only calling you an edgy 12-year-old, but again, they're probably at least a little right. Hey, you can always own it. Whenever you wipe out a Space Marine player's Land Raider and they cry and call you an edgy bitch, blast Linkin Park and say they're right, but that won't untorture the chapter master. As for something you can't as easily refute, the Dark Eldar aren't the most influential faction for a few reasons. For one, their small numbers means they can only do so much damage on a galactic scale. I mean, there's never going to be the Dark Eldar equivalent of a Tyranid Hive Fleet or anything like that. But they also, well, don't really want to massively shake things up. They thrive in the miserable status quo of the galaxy, and engaging in massive battles that change the outcome of fate is to their detriment. Ideally, the Dark Eldar would never fight a battle at all and only attack those who couldn't fight back, but then they wouldn't make a very good candidate for a faction in a war game, now would they? But still, they can only attack the weak to bring home and mutilate if they can help it. They did once capture an Imperial Panacea, which would have cured literally every disease ever and make Nurgle irrelevant, but aside from that, don't expect the Dark Eldar to be making any waves like the Imperium, Craft Worlds, or anyone else might. And even
I don't think that's that important too, because technically if you just play them on the tabletop game, you're playing them to win. To win, you don't need to be the most influential faction, unless the lore is extremely important to you and you like being influential in the story. But other than that, I don't really see it as a huge issue.
And with that example, they didn't change anything about the setting, they just preserved it and kept it from changing. It was just in a big and noticeable way. If the Dark Eldar started to rock in the boat, then the Imperium would suddenly upgrade them from nuisance that sometimes makes a backwater planet disappear to threat we actually need to focus on now instead of ignore. So yeah, don't expect too many major plot threads from these guys, more so than Xenos usually don't get major plot threads anyway. As for rules, here's some issues they have. The biggest without doubt is their fragility. If the Craft World Eldar are made of paper mache, the Dark Eldar are made of used napkins. If someone so much as sends a mildly disappointed look at your way, you're dead. On top of that, because so many of their units can fly, while they're very mobile, anything with a bonus against flying units is going to thoroughly wreck your shit. This is actually one of the reasons they're rare to see on the tabletop. You need to properly be able to maneuver and deploy units, and if you can't, you'll be wiped. If you know what you're doing, then you're probably going to have a rough time. Granted, they're currently the top-ranked faction in terms of win rate, so take all this with a grain of salt. Not too much salt, because I definitely know what I'm talking about, just like a single french fry's worth of salt. Also, expect Dark Eldar games to be decided in about 2 turns of the game, with the rest of the match being more or less a formality. You'll either crush them underneath your spiky-toed boot, or your elves are going to be smeared across time and space. There's very little in between with these guys.
Oh, God.
I watched a game at my local GW lately where it was a Primaris combat patrol versus a Eldar combat patrol, and yeah, what I described is exactly what happened. The Drukhari players slaughtered the Primaris. It wasn't even close. So if you like tense games where the winner can be decided at any moment, or where you can clutch victory from the jaws of defeat at the last second, you probably won't get them here. A big reason for this being their aforementioned fragility and need to be moved and positioned correctly. If you let your BDSM soldiers get caught in the open, you're royally screwed, so you better know what you're doing. This is probably why, despite being the top of the Warhammer tier list right now, they're not the most commonly played army. Bit of a skill ceiling for them. The Dark Eldar don't have very many super heavy options either. In fact, you really only have the Void Raymond Bomber, kind of, and maybe the Tantalus if you include Forge World stuff.
They look really cool though.
I say kind of because to what extent those two are super heavies is debatable. You can ally with the Craft Worlds if that really bothers you, but if you run pure Dark Eldar, then yeah, you don't get any of the Wraith Knights or stuff like that. Speaking of not having things, they also don't have any Psychers, so again, ally with Craft Worlds if you want to use magic. When you live halfway between reality and hell, magic is a bad idea because
So you can ally with other factions to like mix your faction with different units, or how does that work?
it attracts the god that wants to eat your soul specifically. It makes perfect sense lore-wise, don't get me wrong, but from a rules perspective, yeah, you might be a bit better that you don't have wizards. Finally, one of their major strengths in their poisoned weapons usually has some trouble piercing armor. Basically, think of it like this. If you hit them, you're probably going to wound them, but actually hitting the enemy might be a concern. So don't go throwing your Kabalites at a Land Raider, just something to keep in mind. It's not that they can't pierce armor, it's just that you shouldn't be fooled by how poison works. Don't get overconfident and toss your foot soldiers into the meat grinder. They're going to be coming out in liquid form. So that is the Dark Eldar. Glass cannons who fight for selfish gain and for being the edgiest motherfuckers around. If you like an army that requires skill to use properly, being pure distilled evil, and cock and ball torture, these are the guys for you. Thanks for watching and take care out there.
Please.
Oh, if you wonder where the term Drukhari comes from, it's because Games Workshop likes to reference fantasy even though they killed it. Druki for Dark Elves, Drukhari for Dark Eldar. Same things for the Asur and the Craft Worlds, or the Asuryani. Creativity is dead and GW killed it.
So, what I gathered, the Drukhari are not the most appealing to me in terms of design or lore or, well, I guess gameplay, because they require skill and I don't have that in Warhammer. However, he did say cock and ball torture, so I guess they're my favorite faction now. Nah. They're my least favorite so far. Like, they're cool in concept, but they're maybe a little bit too edgy for me. As of right now, orcs are still #1, boys. Let's go. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you for the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.